Hello, welcome to the People Profit Podcast, the show where we flip the script on traditional business thinking and prove that when you put people first, profits follow. I'm Sandra, your guide on this journey to more engaged teams, loyal customers, and a healthier bottom line. These episodes are brought to you by Human Power Solutions, helping organizations unlock the human potential that powers performance. Whether you're a leader, an HR pro, or a curious change maker, buckle up. We're diving into fresh stories, real-world strategies, and a few laughs along the way. Ready to turn your workplace into a profit-powered people machine? Let's get started. And today we have an incredible guest joining us, someone who truly embodies what it means to lead with purpose, resilience, and impact. Rob Nickester is a high-performance coach, commercial real estate investor, and the founder of InspireX, where he helps leaders and entrepreneurs push past their limitations and reach their highest potential. His leadership journey is nothing short of inspiring, from overcoming adversities at a very young age to his time in the Marines to building a career in IT before making the bold transition into real estate and coaching. Today, he manages over $100 million in assets, while also guiding others to become high-performing leaders. Rob believes that leadership isn't just about authority, it's about empowerment. He's a firm advocate for extreme ownership, leading by example and fostering a mindset of continuous growth. In today's episode, we're going to unpack what it really takes to lead in today's workplace, how emotional intelligence can transform teams, and why the leaders are not the ones with all the answers. They're the ones who empower others to find themselves. Get ready for an insightful conversation filled with real stories, practical leadership lessons, and powerful takeaways. So the first question I have for you, just to kind of kick off the conversation, your leadership journey is truly inspiring. You overcame, looks like a lot of adversity at a young age, and you've done some transitions across a lot of different industries. So when you think about it, what pivotal moments shaped your leadership philosophy the most?
Probably the Marine Corps. I was in the Marines, and that taught me a lot about leadership. And that taught me, that leadership was not just about following orders. I was also a police officer for almost 5 years. And then I spent a bulk of my career in IT, working for somebody else. And so across those 3 careers right there alone, I learned an incredible amount about leadership and different leadership styles and ownership, right? And one of the real big things that I've learned that I carry with me to today, and I love it. It's there's a book by Jocko Willink that I read that a lot of people have read called Extreme Ownership. And to me, like, that is the epitome of leadership. To me, is about leadership's about empowerment, not authority.
Mm-hmm.
And to get that empowerment, it's about taking responsibility as a leader. That is so huge in no matter what job you're in or what career you're in. It's so important for leaders to actually take ownership of what's going wrong or what's going right, and then work through issues, because I just see so much today where leaders people like to come in and flex power and play the blame game. And there's so much bad leadership out there.
Amen to that. Yes, there is. That's interesting. So your military experience, my husband is, ex-combat vet, Army Airborne. He's a supervisor, very regimented in almost everything in his life, which is great because I'm not. But how did your time in the Marines, even though it was brief, right? Influence your leadership style and your approach to business? So I hear you say, I think of the Marines as being like super authoritative, like you do, right? Like, how do you empower and how do you kind of take that into the business world?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it is very authoritative, and you just follow commands, right?
Yeah.
That you follow orders. And the reason it's that way is because if you're in a combat situation and you don't follow orders, people could die instantly.
Mm-hmm.
But you also have to know when to think outside the box and challenge leadership and ask yourself, does this make sense? What I'm being asked to do right here? Obviously in a combat situation, it's completely different.
Yeah.
But in a real world situation when people are just working and following their day jobs, authoritative and just giving people orders is not the way to lead. It's all about, gauging where your team is, finding out where your pain points are, talking through them, communicating and working through. So, what it showed me, kind of getting off the beaten path there, what it showed me is that you need to think outside the box. You just can't follow orders, because just following orders, you're never going to get anywhere in life. And for people, that I help who want to excel, you can't just take authority and let somebody tell you what to do all day long. You really need to think outside the box. You need to challenge your leaders sometimes, because I feel like I'm here to do a job. And if you're not challenging your boss sometimes, then what are they paying you for? Right. Yeah. I don't want to, I never wanted to be a yes man.
Yeah.
And if you're a yes man, I don't want you on my team. I need somebody who's going to challenge me and make what we're doing better. And the only way you can do that is if I say something and it's wrong or it doesn't strike you as the right way to go, you need to challenge me and let's have a conversation about it. That's what makes a good leader and a better leadership style, I think. And overall, I think the team's better, people are happier, and you accomplish more and grow together.
I love that. That's awesome. I think, you're right. It's when you're telling people and when you tell people and you micromanage people, they feel like you don't trust them. So that kind of brings me to your guiding principle of extreme ownership, which I found that really, just a really cool phrase. What was a defining moment to you when you had to take on a full challenge? How did that shape you? So where did that come from, that extreme ownership? Where did it come from?
So honestly, in the police department was the first chance I really had where I was in a leadership role. I was still pretty young. I had up to that point had been in a lot of different roles. And as a police officer, you show up as a first responder. So you're the first on the scene in a lot of situations, and you have to take ownership immediately of everything that's going on, because in certain situations, people panic, people don't know what to do, and they need direction. And so that is the real first taste of being under pressure, being in a situation that might have been dire, or people could be dying, or, whatever the case may be, right? Car accidents is a big one that I think about. You show up on scene and you instantly, people are kind of freaking out, and you got to take ownership of the problem, even though it may not be your problem. You didn't create it, but you have to take ownership of it, and you have to direct people on how to handle the situation. And that comes with showing up and looking at it and not worrying about who did what, but just taking ownership and directing people the way they need to go. And then it really got magnified for me when I read Jocko's book, and he talked about it. And that's when it really hit home that that's what I was doing, is taking ownership and responsibility. And where it really got better for me is when you learn when employees do things, and they're not what you expect them to do.
Right.
It may not be right, or it's not working out the way you want. And so many people nowadays want to point the finger and go, well, you're doing this wrong, instead of going, you know what, maybe I didn't communicate my instructions clearly, or maybe I didn't let you know how I wanted this done, or let's talk about this. So before, you blame anybody, you got to take ownership of the problem. And no matter whose fault it is, just take ownership of it and own the problems, because that's the best way you're going to get through the problem and communicate and fix the problem.
Yeah. The blame game never works. It just never works. And I think go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I see a lot of that. I deal with a lot of companies, a lot of corporations, where people come in and they see issues, especially in new management positions. And the very first thing they do is start dictating what you can't do and what you can do. instead of actually like grab an issue, take ownership of that issue, and then communicate, how can we solve this as a team? They start flexing their power instead.
Yeah. The new manager is the new supervisor. That's always a thing. And one of my best lines, I think, is one of the things we talk about when we do our facilitation to new managers. We're like, congratulations, you're a manager. Now nothing's about you anymore. It's all about your employees. And that usually takes people off guard because you've actually just released your power, and you need to give the power to the people that need to produce that work. So like looking at that, we look at that kind of a scenario, and the employees, when the leadership doesn't adapt, like that new leader or just that authoritarian leader that we have in this world right now in these very dysfunctional companies, what shifts do you think today's leaders need to take to better support their employees to give them a better experience?
They need to stop believing that they have all the answers and trust the ability of their employees.
Okay.
I think that's a really big shift. And I've been actually posting about this on LinkedIn all week. It's just a coincidence that we're talking about leadership. But absolutely listening to your employees and stop thinking that you have all the answers. And the biggest shift is listen to your employees, communicate more, take responsibility.
Love that. It's funny. I was having lunch today with a colleague, and we were talking about, I just joined another coaching program, and she looked at me and she's like, I didn't think you had anything left to learn. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm a continuous learner. I will learn forever. And I wish leaders would have that mentality, because things are shifting so much in our world. The employee base is shifting. Everything is shifting for us, And
Absolutely.
you went from the Marine Corps to IT, now to real estate and coaching, right?
Yeah.
So what's carried over from all these different experiences? What's carried over between these industries, and what things did you have to let go of, unlearn?
Oh my goodness, so much. So, one of the big things that I carry with me now is great leaders create leaders, not followers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you empower your employees, and you want to level your employees up, and you want to support them, even if that means losing them. That is so important. And let me think about this for a second. The ability to read, understand, adapt to people. I had something that I wanted to say and I completely forgot. It just went.
Yeah. And so when you think about leaders, we talk a lot about emotional intelligence. We talk about our employees and how the leaders need to have emotional intelligence to build these stronger teams. But so much of our workplace now is remote or hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And, so what kinds of your thoughts with how can leaders cultivate that emotional intelligence through the screen?
That's a really tough one. I've dealt with that actually quite a bit. I think there's good and bad when it comes to remote workers, right? I think we come from being a little older myself, absolutely come from a world where we had to go into the office, right? Mm-hmm. And so by the time I started working remote, it was actually just before the pandemic. I had already proven myself. I'd spent almost over 30 years in IT, and I'd proven myself. And so when you get sent home and suddenly become a full-time employee remotely, and what I did as an IT architect was largely project-based. So it was easier in some aspects because my bosses could measure my performance based on how are the projects getting completed. Mm-hmm. But we have a younger generation now that is trying to go 100% remote without ever having to prove themselves. And I think the biggest challenge in that is, and leaders really need to understand this, is if you don't have experience working remotely, you have to be disciplined no matter who you are. And it takes some time to gain that discipline. It certainly did for me. When I first started working remotely, you suddenly find yourself in a new environment at home, and I'm like, well, I'm home. I can do this and I can do this, and I've got some chores to do. And you quickly realize I'm not here to do chores, that I'm here to work. Mm-hmm. And I have to and you have to set boundaries and have discipline. And if you don't have that, which comes with experience, you have to lock yourself in a room, and so nobody can bother you. But I think the biggest challenge and the biggest thing leaders can do with remote workers is have an understanding of where their employees may be in that journey. If they're younger or they're older, depending on their job, is it project-based, I think they need to have an understanding and help their employees learn how they best work remotely.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest learning curve is, how do I best work remotely? Some people can go to a coffee shop and work really well, where I can't have distractions. I need to lock myself into an office.
Yeah.
Running a business is hard. Developing your people shouldn't be. At Human Power Solutions, we act as your outsourced chief learning officer, designing custom learning and development experiences that actually move the needle. No fluff, no cookie cutter workshops, just results. Whether your people need better communication, stronger leadership, or less burnout, we provide strategic solutions that align with your goals and keep your team moving forward. Visit hpowersolutions.com and unlock your team's full potential without disrupting operations.
It's funny. Yeah. My youngest son is 25 and graduated from college right after the pandemic. So came out to the workforce. So the workforce was very different. And she got a new job last year, fully remote, never really met his boss. And now he's traveling. So he's starting to meet new people. But he said it's been really difficult, trying to acclimate into a company culture, being fully remote. So I think leaders need to understand that even if they're a fully remote company, they've got to do things to bring everybody into the fold.
Absolutely. I've actually dealt with that myself. I worked for a company where I got hired on full remote, and the company was actually out of San Jose, and my team worked out of Times Square in New York City, and I was located here in Dallas, Texas. I really, really struggled with that. And what leaders need to take away is that I didn't feel like part of the team, out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up flying on a regular basis to meet my team and spend a week with them every few months so I could work with them. So they knew that I was there, so that they would give me things to do so that I was part of the team. But if you work with a team, so that's where, as a leader also comes in. If you work with the team, you need to understand if your team's all remote, you may have to do things to bring your team together, to do some exercises so that they trust each other and they work well together. Where if you lead a team where everybody's remote, it's going to be completely different.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. It's definitely a challenge. Leaders have had it's not been an easy transition for anyone, that's for sure.
Right.
Yeah. So your leadership approach: fail fast, learn faster, right?
Yeah.
I think those of us that are entrepreneurs, I always tell people, you got to have the stomach for it, because it's an up and down journey, right?
Yeah.
Can you share an experience where failure became a stepping stone to your success?
Absolutely. Failure is such a huge part of what we do. And I actually have a saying for that, because I've been told so many times, I absolutely come from nothing. I grew up with zero money, zero opportunities. College was not even an option when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
And now when people look at me, they're like, wow, you're so lucky to have money. You're so lucky to have a big, beautiful home. You're so lucky to have all these things. And I didn't know how to handle that when people used to tell me I was so lucky. It used to make me so angry. But my response is now, I've failed more times than you've tried.
Oh.
And so that's where failure is so important to your journey, right? You can't get successful and hit your goals if you don't fail. So fail is absolutely important. And if people tell me they've never failed, well, I don't want you on my team. Not because you're not good enough, but because you need to fail a few times, because you learn most from your failures.
Oh, I'm writing that down. I love that. I failed more times than you've tried.
Yeah.
All right. That's so great for those people that are just the complainers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. That's great. So you talk about coaching leadership, like the coaching style, right? Rather than dictating. So if someone was to listen today at maybe a leader, someone that's our age or a little older, who has that mindset of, I'm going to tell people what to do, what practical steps can these leaders take to shift into more of a coaching mindset? What tips would you give to them?
Well, first and foremost, work more on yourself than you do anything else to become a better leader, right? And it's more about listening. It's more about listening than it is telling people what to do. But what I just thought of is one of the most important things I've learned is that great leaders ask great questions. And so what you can do when you're in a leadership position and you want to become a better leader is to make sure you're asking lots of questions and listening more to your team than you are telling them what to do.
I love that. Yep, that's definitely that listening piece and try to get a pulse on people. I have lots of conversations with different people. I'm a chair of a bunch of different boards and things. And we have someone who's a little rough around the edges. But I had a conversation. I said, she's an introvert. She's not comfortable presenting. And you just have to understand that the dismissive attitude isn't because she's being dismissive. It's because she's not comfortable in what you're asking her to do. And that was a little bit of I saw a little bit of a light bulb, like, oh, didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Right? Because we always think about our own feelings and how we feel about what's being said to us versus maybe look at it from a different perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of the great ways, so like when you deal with different personality types like that, introverts especially, instead of having them do as I say, you could use the phrase of let's do this or solve this issue together. Mm-hmm. And that is an incredible line you can use with introverts because that will bring them out of their shell, working closer together with you, knowing that their opinion matters. And I think that brings a lot of people out of being such an introvert with teams and their boss.
So you talk about listening over talking as a crucial leadership skill. How do you foster a culture where employees feel truly heard and valued? What kind of tips would you give to those leaders?
I would absolutely say actions are more important than words. One of the big things that I see the most is there's so many leaders out there that say, I hear you, we're listening to you, but nothing ever changes. Yeah. They say those words, empty words to employees so often. Yeah. And they say, I hear you, we're listening to you, but they never change anything because in reality, they have an agenda and they're just checking boxes and they're doing what they want to do instead of actually listening to their employees, taking that feedback up to a higher level and fighting and communicating with their bosses and their peers to make actual change, right? And so that's where it comes back to me on, does your boss or do those leaders actually work on themselves? There's just so many leaders out there that are stuck in this career mode where they're rising in their career by standing on other people's backs.
Yeah. So true. You know, when I think about your business, right? I think about how you scaled your real estate, your investment, your ventures. I mean, you've done a lot of really neat things and you've managed really large teams and large projects. I mean, what you do and is fascinating. What's the key skill or lesson have you learned from scaling businesses? Because that's so, as you start off as an entrepreneur, you got yourself, right? And then maybe a couple of other people, and then you kind of go. Yeah. There's definitely some lessons that you can learn there. So what things have you learned from scaling your business the way that you have?
Probably the biggest lesson is who, not how. When you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to do everything yourself. And for a lot of us who are entrepreneurs, that's how we got to where we are, is by doing everything myself, by failing over and over and over, learning how to do something and then becoming successful at it. But when you get to a point where you need to scale, it's really easy to fall in that trap of nobody can do it as well as me. Nobody knows what's up here. And so you try to do everything yourself and you end up not scaling, you end up failing, you end up being burnt out. There's so many different scenarios, and who, not how, is one of the biggest takeaways that I've gotten is make sure you're finding the right people for the job. You may be able to do everything. You may be a jack of all trades, but it doesn't mean you need to do everything. Your time has gotten more valuable by focusing on what you're best at. And so pay the experts what they deserve to take something off your plate and let them do what they do well. And that'll allow you to do what you do well. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway.
Yeah. And Dan Sullivan, I mean, that who, not how 10X is better than 2X.
Yes.
I discovered that last year when I was driving 4 hours for a client up in Vermont. Someone recommended it. I popped it in on Audible, and it was a game changer.
Yeah.
Right. So, because I was one of those entrepreneurs that everything's in my head. No one can get into my head, and I have to do everything. I love that advice, and I tell people to read that book all the time.
Absolutely.
So my who's were my financial people, because that's not where I'm comfortable.
Yeah.
So for your who's, like, who are the people that you like? The first, if you're an entrepreneur listening to this and saying, okay, I want to scale, like, what's that first person that I hire?
It's going to depend on your skill set. For me, that's somebody who's organized. I am all over the place. I am very ADHD sometimes. I have 1,000 thoughts going through my head a minute, which can make it very difficult. I have a lot of great ideas. I have so many things that I want to do, and getting that out is very difficult sometimes. So for me, my first hire is somebody who helps me stay on track, organizes my calendar, keeps track of, hey, we're working on these 3 items today. And when something just, catches my attention, no, back here, Rob, this is what we're doing. So it depends on your skill set, right? You don't want people that do what you do and that are exactly the same as you and have the same skill set as you. You want to hire people that don't have, or that have the better skills where you're lacking in skills.
So my producer is cracking up. I'm watching him right now, and he's laughing his butt off because he just describes me. I'm like, here's what we're working on, and then the squirrel over there.
Right. Absolutely.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that. How do you, when we think about our teams, and now as you build your who, not how, and you empower them, how do you get them to think bigger? What's the most powerful way you challenge and inspire people to push back what they think? Because only people that limit people are ourselves. You and I are part of a very dynamic group of people that we're together, and there's no limits to what we can do.
Right.
So many people have those limiting beliefs. Like, how do you inspire people that you bring on to say, just go?
Asking them questions, asking them the right questions, getting absolute clarity and vision, asking why, right? Like the 7 whys. I use that so often in everything I do. When somebody has an idea or something that we're trying to accomplish, we ask why, and then they might answer, and then we ask why again, and they look at me and they think about it a little deeper, and their why changes a little bit. By the time you get to 7 times, you've really clarified a vision of what you're trying to accomplish. So I think asking questions.
Well, that's great. That's the 7 whys. I don't use that very often, but getting to that root cause, or getting down to the root of what you're trying to, so many gems today. This has been amazing. This has been great. Yeah. I just have a couple more questions for you. So when you think about different aspiring entrepreneurs or business owners, professionals that are, maybe even professionals that are looking to jump into this crazy entrepreneurs, business owner space, what advice would you give them based on your own journey? You've had quite a journey. So when they're thinking about taking that leap, what would you tell them?
Do something that you're passionate about, and you got to burn the boats. And what I mean by burn the boats is you can't leave one foot in the door and one foot out the door, right? Because there's so many people that try businesses and they try to start their business at the same time they're doing something else. And that may work. And if it works for you, that's great. But for those people who are trying to be an entrepreneur or start a business, and the business is kind of going and they're really struggling to get it going, a lot of times that's because they have one foot stuck in the world where their W-2 is. They've got, it's a crutch, right? So they don't necessarily do and take the risks that they need to take to make their business really successful. So you need to burn the boats so that there's no turning back. You have no choice but to succeed. That's probably the biggest one.
That's scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like you, I didn't have much money. Like I did not grow up in any way, shape or form, any kind of privileged arena. And it's been very interesting. Like every time I've been really afraid of moving to the next level, I've just moved to the next level.
Well,
right.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to add to that is be yourself. I have found this in my own life to be incredibly powerful, is that to be unapologetically you, because there's so many people trying to be who they think people think they are instead of actually just be who you are. And when people see who you are and they see the genuineness of that, makes all the difference in the world.
That's awesome. That's great. As we're kind of wrapping up our conversation, and this has been great. So great. What's one thing you'd like to leave our listeners with? One takeaway from leadership, what would it be?
The best leaders trust the process and empower their teams and adjust quickly when needed.
Nice. Rob, I really appreciate that. Now, people want to hear more about what you do. How could people reach you, contact you? How can they kind of check you out?
I'm on all social media platforms. So the easiest way, my website is robnickester.com, which is N as in November, Ickester is my last name. Or my company, inspirex.co. Nice. They both go to the same place. And then I'm at Rob Nickester on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram.
That's awesome. So that is right at the bottom of our screen for our listeners and our viewers here today. Well, Rob, I really appreciate your time today and your insights on leadership. It was an excellent conversation. And thank you so much again for your time and for joining us on the People Profit Podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was wonderful.
Have a good day.
You too.
That's a wrap on this episode of the People Profit Podcast. If you found a nugget of wisdom or even just a spark of inspiration, share the love, subscribe, leave us a review, and pass the episode along to a colleague who's ready to build a people-first culture. Big thanks to our sponsor, Human Power Solutions, for championing workplace where humans thrive and profits rise. Want to learn how they can energize your team? Head over to hpowersolutions.com to get started. I'm Sandra Coker, reminding you that when you invest in people, you invest in profit. See you next time.